Joining me now to talk about all this is a great friend, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and a wonderful ally during the Trump administration years. Senator Ted Cruz, welcome, sir, to the program. I want you and I to have a great talk about foreign policy. But first, you heard my opening riff on this crazy ProPublica IRS scandal. And being the smart gentleman you are, I thought you might have a thought or two on it.
Well, Larry, it's great to be with you. Let me congratulate you on being back on air. Things seem right in the world with you back on air, and I always enjoy your analysis of what's going on in the world. As usual, you're spot on. When it comes to the IRS, this is an abuse of power. It's a grotesque abuse of power. It's politicization of the IRS. We saw Barack Obama politicize the IRS, and we're just a few months into the Biden administration, and they're politicizing the IRS. And, you know, if you're sitting at home and you're thinking, well, that's just those super rich billionaires, what do I worry about that? Listen, if their privacy of their tax filings isn't protected, your privacy isn't either. And whoever leaked this illegally should be prosecuted and should go to jail. And I'll tell you, the best solution for this is what I've been advocating for a long time, which is that we should adopt a simple flat tax. It's what you said in your opening monologue. Broaden the base, lower the rates, have a simple flat tax, fill out your taxes on a postcard, and then abolish the IRS. Get rid of that abusive, politicized institution. Shut them down. I
love that, Senator. You know I love that. I'm a sucker for all that stuff. I got Laffer coming on later in the show. He's going to walk through it again. But thank you for that, especially. Let's turn to this G7 meeting and Uncle Joe cavorting in the English countryside. First of all, what do you think? Does he understand how high the stakes are? In the post-Trump era, we can't give up, for example, NATO paying its own dues. We can't let Russia rule the roost, not just with Nord Stream, but with many other things. We can't spend our time on foreigners raising American taxes. I mean, what do you think? Where do you think Biden is going? What's the substance here? I know the pomp and circumstance, but in terms of foreign policy, one of your areas of expertise, what should he be doing?
Well, Larry, I've got to say it's been stunning to see in the first 5 months foreign policy blunder after foreign policy blunder after foreign policy blunder. You have to go back to the Jimmy Carter administration to find an administration that had as many catastrophic foreign policy mistakes. Joe Biden began his presidency by ripping up the Remain in Mexico agreement, an historic agreement President Trump had negotiated with Mexico that had lowered illegal immigration to the lowest rate in 45 years. Biden ripped that agreement up, and we now have a border crisis that Joe Biden created. Not only that, we saw Joe Biden in the Middle East undermine our friends and strengthen our enemies. We saw Joe Biden undermine Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu. We saw him send over $250 million to the Palestinian Authority that is in bed with Hamas and pledge as his number one foreign policy objective, sending billions of dollars to the Ayatollah Khamenei, who pledges and chants death to America and death to Israel. And what did that do? It took what had been historic peace, flowering peace of the Abraham Accords, and within 9 months turned it into war in the Middle East with over 4,000 rockets raining down upon Israel. And then you mentioned Russia a minute ago. It is stunning that Joe Biden managed to give a multi-billion-dollar gift to Vladimir Putin. He waived the mandatory sanctions. I authored those sanctions, bipartisan sanctions. President Trump signed them into law, not once but twice. They shut down that pipeline from Russia to Germany. It was an incredible bipartisan victory. It was a victory for Europe. It was a victory for America and American jobs. And what did Joe Biden do? He said, Putin, start the pipeline again. I'm waiving the sanctions. And this is, I believe, a generational geopolitical mistake that will strengthen Russia at the expense of all of the West.
See, this is so serious. You're quite right. And we did work together on these sanctions. You know, we had them stopped out the last 100 miles, which is not nothing in that game, as you want to know. What's so ironic here, Senator, is that supposedly you got all these media people saying, well, now we can normalize relations with Europe because President Trump is gone. I think that's hogwash. But the irony is that the Europeans, the EU, opposes the Nord Stream 2. The EU is opposed to Germany playing ball with Russia. Now, why, if Biden wants to make love to the EU, if such a thing is fathomable, why not start? I mean, to me, he should have said, okay, we are going to keep the sanctions. Nobody can help the last 100 miles and deal a blow to Russia. But he didn't do it.
Yeah, no, look, you're exactly right. The European Parliament has voted to condemn Nord Stream 2. The vote was 400 and some odd votes to about 100. It was an overwhelming vote in the European Parliament. And this is really an amazing foreign policy victory. You know, you go back to the summer of 2019, where Putin was rushing to build this pipeline. I first introduced the sanctions seeking to shut it down. And there was Russian disinformation that Putin was putting out that said the sanctions wouldn't work, they couldn't work, there was no way to stop the pipeline. Though that misinformation was a lie then, it's a lie today. We passed those sanctions. I got Democratic support, Republican support, passed it through both houses of Congress. President Trump signed that bill, if I remember correctly, at 7 p.m. on a Thursday. At 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes before it was signed into law, the company that was building Nord Stream 2 announced they were immediately halting construction.
Yes.
And for a year, it lay dormant. Now, Tony Blinken's talking point is, well, they inherited a tough situation because it was 90% built. Well, you know what? A 90% complete pipeline is 0% complete. It doesn't work until you finish it.
We literally,
Biden came in and gave this to Putin.
We had him over a barrel, and he gave it away. And you're absolutely right. Let me just ask you the last few moments, sir. I'm interested in your thoughts on U.S. Anglo, U.S. British relations. Boris Johnson gets a fairly good press, but he's a bit of an erratic. I mean, I've known him for a long time. You probably have, too. He's a bit of an erratic guy. There's a couple things. Number one, do you think the Bidens will, and do you think we should move to a free trade deal with Britain in the Brexit era? And number two, Senator, do you think we can rely on Boris Johnson to keep Huawei out of the 5G game in England? At first, by the way, they were very bad. But then after COVID, Prime Minister got very sick and suddenly hated the Chinese, and now Huawei is out. Right. Will we keep them out? And in your judgment, in the post-Brexit era, should we have a free trade deal?
Yeah, two great questions. On question number one, I think we absolutely should have a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. They are one of our closest allies, an incredibly close and valuable ally. Boris Johnson has been a strong leader for the UK. I am worried that the Biden admin is going to try to undermine that they're mad about Brexit and that they're going to try to work against our allies as they're doing across the globe. And you know, on Huawei, I've got to say that the UK government, as you noted at the beginning, they were going to have Huawei install significant telecom infrastructure in the United Kingdom. You spoke out against that. President Trump spoke out against it. I had Nigel Farage on my podcast, Verdict with Ted Cruz, and Nigel was there. We were talking about this topic, and I pointed out the UK is part of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing agreement, our closest allies.
Right.
And the problem is Huawei is a Chinese espionage agency. And so if Huawei provides their infrastructure, it sets up for the Chinese communists to intercept our communications. And what I told Nigel, and what was covered heavily in the UK, I said, listen, we love the Brits, but 4 eyes are better than 6 eyes. Which means as important as that alliance is, we're not willing to give our most confidential secrets to the Chinese. Thankfully, and you noted it right, after COVID, the British leadership realized the Chinese communists can't be trusted. I got to say, as Joe Biden goes to Europe, I have zero faith that he will stand up against China, that he will stand up against Huawei. The Biden administration refused even to commit to keeping Huawei on the entities list. I asked multiple Biden cabinet nominees that. Not a one of them would make that commitment. And so if Joe Biden wants to show he can do something, he's going to be in Europe. When he's talking with the EU, he ought to get the EU to agree, just like the Brits have, to keep Huawei out of Europe.
That's, if no other reason, Senator Ted, I wanted to have you on to raise that 5G point and give it some visibility. Nobody pays any attention to it. You are quite right. It's the heart of our global intelligence system, the Five Eyes. We cannot let it slip. You're also right. I mean, you and I have talked a million times about this. Huawei is not on our team. They're on China's team. And I think it's important that the Bidens stay with this. And I think, by the way, they got to keep Boris Johnson, Prime Minister Johnson. He's a good man. But he needs to be on a short leash on this stuff, too. I hope you'll come back and talk some more. I love talking to you about foreign policy just as much as tax cuts. Senator Ted Cruz.
I look forward to it.
Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, thanks very much, sir. Coming up on Kudlow.